Hello, this is Roof of the Clan of the Grey Wolf, and welcome again to 16-Bit Gems. Back in the 90s, I was one of but many young nerdlings who would writhe in ecstasy over the amazing experiences that Super Nintendo RPGs had to offer. Famously, Secret of Mana is one of these RPGs, due in no small part to its amazing multiplayer options and real-time battle strategy. Not so famously, however, Secret of Mana had an illegitimate cousin. Yes, dear viewers, this Bast RPG has a name, and it's called Secret of Evermore. And despite your preconceptions, this is a 16-bit gem. Now, why do I call Secret of Evermore illegitimate? Well, much like a lolcat, Square decided to sleep around once upon a time and tried a saucy experiment with their newly formed development house in America. Creatively dubbed Square USA. Things got frisky, and 9 months later, the product of that union was their one and only title, Secret of Evermore. A game that borrowed heavily from Secret of Mana's DNA, but was different enough to package for retail sale. And their similarities go well beyond Square's penchant for creative names. The gameplay, the AI, the menu system, even the on-screen interface, all were carried over from Secret of Mana. And there were a lot of people that thought that Secret of Evermore was Square's ill-advised attempt to create a Western-only RPG in lieu of just porting over Secret of Mana 2 from Japan. And they got a lot of flack for that. I mean, it's not like it hasn't happened before. Apparently the Japanese have a history of thinking that we aren't able to figure out their incredibly complicated video games. They must figure that we're too busy admiring our huge American wangs or something like that. But in the end, Square didn't even bother translating Secret of Mana 2. They didn't think it would be able to get by Nintendo of America's certification policies, mainly because of the large amount of bugs in the Japanese version. But the Secret of Mana engine was still valid, and Square USA was able to add enough to make Evermore a worthwhile addition to the Square family. Even if it is the crazy uncle who shows up at the family reunions drunk and hits on the hot cousin and tries to show off his lawn dart skills, but only winds up with a trip to the emergency room. That did happen in everyone else's family, right? The game starts off in Podunk, USA. That's right, Square USA put all of their cards down on the table in the first 5 seconds. This brings up an interesting bit of trivia. As far as I know, this is the only game Square ever published that was never released in Japan. Not that you can tell from some of the scenes. Should we be seeing this? But anyway, back to the story. You'll then see a kid and his dog stumble upon a mysterious mansion. A sexy, sexy mysterious mansion. While breaking and entering, they find a huge and dangerous machine. And the dog starts chewing the cords, because sometimes dogs just do things. This results in the pair getting zapped into another dimension.
Of course!
I bet that box turtle he passed up at the pet shop isn't looking so lame right now, is it? The boy and his overly curious dog land in a place known as Evermore. The boy, let's call him Rue, and his dog, who we'll name Kitty, discover that a mad scientist's experiment trapped himself and 3 of his friends here 30 years ago. Damn you, science! When will you ever do anything constructive for humanity? Each of the lost people made different worlds.
With their minds.
Based on their personal interests. This is really convenient for you as a player, since you won't get bored with the same setting. You'll travel through lands resembling the Stone Age, Antiquity, the Middle Ages, and even a futuristic space station. And the surroundings are not the only things that change from one land to the next. Your faithful companion, for reasons unknown, changes into different kinds of dogs as well. Although, I'm not sure what omnipotent being he pissed off to be turned into a giant pink poodle.
Morning, darling.
Sadly, one of the things dropped from Secret of Mana that they really should have kept was the multiplayer support. You could have up to 3 people at once playing Mana, and no more than one can play Evermore? Dick move, Square. At least you can switch between the two characters and use each of their talents to accomplish whatever the situation calls for. Kitty can sniff out items and generally has a stronger attack, but the boy is able to use alchemy, which is Square USA's nom de plume for magic. For those of you who don't speak Italian, that means it's the soup of the day. This game has an interesting new twist on the whole magic point system. Instead of a certain amount of MP that just refills whenever you rest, you have to find alchemy ingredients, either at a store or by sniffing them out, in order to use your spells. It's something that I haven't seen used very often, but having a magic system based on consumables certainly makes you think twice about just how many alchemy spells you should use in a given situation. You have to use a variety of spells, and you can't just spam attack a boss to death with the same one, or you're likely to run out of particular ingredients. As an unintended consequence, however, if you're normally a little stingy about using your items in other RPGs, then you're going to make the game that much more difficult by using the bare minimum of alchemy spells here. That's the problem I would always run into. I'd finish Chrono Trigger without even using a Mega Elixir, since I was so worried I'd run out during the game. It brings a whole new meaning to the saying, you can't take it with you. However, if you're smart, you won't be hoarding your ingredients. You'll be practicing your alchemy, since that's the only way it will level up. Yes, much like Secret of Mana, your spells level up the more you use them. And in that same vein, like mana, you'll acquire several different weapons during the game as well, which you can switch between at your leisure, perhaps choosing it to match your mood. For example, when I'm feeling a little stabby, I'll use a sword. And when I'm in the mood to blow the ever-loving crap out of everything,
sounds like somebody's got a case of the Mundus.
Then I switch up to the bazooka. And I ain't talking about the gum. When you unwrap this bad boy, you're gonna get more than just a subpar comic from the 50s. And as you kill more enemies with each weapon, they'll also gain levels and abilities. In the case of the bazooka, you can charge it up for massive damage. But make sure you hit the enemy's weak point. Yeah, I promise that'll stop being funny as soon as the PS4 comes out. Each of the lands have their own version of money, which is not as annoying as it sounds, and works just as you would expect from any other RPG. There are a couple of places in the game, however, where marketplaces go into full-on side quest mode. That is, if you want a certain MacGuffin, you're going to need to trade something like 5 locks of Will Wheaton's hair, 2 concrete dildos, and 3 jars of bull semen for it. And sometimes you have to make trades just to get the otherwise useless items that you'll need to trade for the good stuff. Do you realize how poor the exchange rate is for Wheaton hair to bull semen? I never quite liked this part of the game, but to be fair, it's not required, like some other fetch quests. I'm looking at you, Final Fantasy VII. But maybe it turned me off because my OCD never let me pass it by. I've talked to several people who actually liked this trading game, so hey, if you like playing games that simulate 1,000-year-old Arabian bazaars, maybe you'll like it too. But that's not so bad. In fact, I really only have one major gripe about this game, and it stems from a universal truth I've discovered through hours and hours of tedious research with my Super Nintendo. I hate mazes! Is there any other way to just arbitrarily lengthen the game than by adding frigging mazes? It's an exercise in time wasting. I even stopped liking the pen and paper ones when I was 3, but when you add a metric shit ton of bad guys around every corner just to slow you down, then these long winding corridors that frequently lead to dead ends just become unbearable. Unfortunately, Square USA brought great dishonor to their house by deploying at least one maze in each land, meaning that you're gonna want to have that bookmark to GameFAQs.com handy when you hit them. On a more positive note, the graphics are quite good, which makes sense considering Evermore came out when the Super Nintendo's life was waning and everyone was awaiting the dominance of the Nintendo Ultra 64. The style is reminiscent of Secret of Mana. Shocking, right? In that you have a variety of elaborate sprites layered on a 2D background, all viewed from a top-down perspective. The famous Mode 7 capabilities of the Super Nintendo are alive and well here too. The art direction, however, diverges quite a bit from Mana's Japanese-style fantasy setting. Evermore benefits from the variety of lands you'll explore in the game, and the result alternates between beautiful and chilling backdrops for you to explore. I find the difference between Ivor Tower, the bustling medieval town, and Ebonkeep, its deserted doppelganger, to be especially stark and, frankly, a little unsettling. I do have to say that the soundtrack is nothing to really write home about. especially considering the twin giants of video game music that came out around the same time: Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI. I mean, it certainly doesn't detract from the game. It's moody and creepy when the tone calls for it, which apparently is all the time, and fits each land's theme well. However, most of the tunes just aren't that memorable, with the possible exception of Tinker's Workshop. I can't really recall any of the themes off of the top of my head, and that's in great contrast to the other games I just mentioned. Alright, enough of that. The use of sound and ambiance are premium here, and as intended, they simply enhance mood rather than becoming a major player in the action like any number of its Square family members. The best that can be said about Evermore's music is that it just doesn't get in the way. The last thing I should mention about this game is the cameos in it. These newly hired developers were mindful enough of their pedigree to include a few nods to the successes of Square's past. If you look carefully in the Coliseum crowd, you'll spot Terra, Locke, Strago, Realm, Mog, and Umaro from Final Fantasy VI. And in Ebon Keep, you'll find a shop run by the retired paladin, Cecil, from Final Fantasy IV. This means that, not counting fighting games for the PSP, which I refuse to acknowledge, Cecil has more cameos in Secret of Evermore than in all the other Final Fantasy games not ending in 4, combined. That makes my soul weep. Repeatedly. In the end, Secret of Evermore really is a great game, which makes sense considering it took so much from another great game, but it's a shame that it was overlooked in its own time due to eccentricities in the plot and anger over lack of Secret of Mana 2. But now's your chance to rectify that. It's not every day that you find a game that's so ridiculously similar to another and at the same time rather unique. So, thank you, Square USA. You've proven that, with your one and only progeny, not only can Americans co-opt a successful game mechanic from a foreign land, but by adding new ideas, homages to old favorites, and a little bit of processed cheese, you can make it unique and fun in its own way. Kind of like a croissant sandwich. I think I skipped breakfast. This has been Roof of the Clan of the Grey Wolf, and there is no reset button.